Welcome, everybody, to Secrets Revealed. I'm your host, Zen Garcia, and I'm honored to have as guest with me for the next 2 hours, Timothy Alberino. Timothy, are you there, brother?
I think I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, and you sound really good. First, I do want to thank you for taking the time to join us and give you opportunity to present your website information and also where people can go to support your work and also contact information should you wish to do so. Can you talk a little bit about the your documentary series and also, if you wouldn't mind, how you got involved with working with Steve Quayle and Skywatch and the others that are part of that?
Well, um, the documentary series is uh, it is based on the work of Steve Quayle as well as the work of David Flynn and my own research, and we kind of combine those three things. We go into the we go to different countries seeking out places, situations that are relevant to our studies, to our research. And so we do in the field work. We go to megalithic sites. We interview people from everything having to do with, again, megaliths to giants, of course, also UFOs and everything in between. So we really have it's a very broad spectrum of topics that we cover, that we're willing to cover, that we're looking for in terms of leads, in terms of interviews and so forth. And uh, it's very much like Steve's book, True Legends. His book, True Legends, deals with a whole host of different subjects that are rooted in the Genesis 6 narrative. That's what True Legends, the series, is. It's basically the film, the documentary version of Steve Quayle's book, True Legends. It's kind of a long story, but I was living in the Amazon basin in Peru for 10 years before I moved back to the United States. I'm originally from Cleveland, Ohio, and I moved back to Cleveland for a short period of time. It was sort of a transitional period for me, and during that time, I began, I believe it was an email correspondence with Steve. I can't even remember what it was about, but it just snowballed from that email correspondence into working with Steve, doing some things with Spanish and translation, running a Spanish website for a while, and into what we're doing now. So it's not a very entertaining story, but that's the way it happened. And now we are at this point, much of our work is converging, dovetailing at the very least with Tom Horn's Skywatch TV productions and some of the things that they're doing, especially as it relates to the Vatican.
Well, people, in your intro, when you talked about the fallen angels, giants, UFOs, and all of that, a lot of people that study the Bible, they don't realize that these are all esoteric topics which are included within the scripture and hidden within the word, and that when you have this understanding and have this revelation, um, then a lot of those things which may not have made sense, like Genesis 6 and the sons of God, and they come out and they come to life and they make the Bible um, meaningful in a way, in my belief, in my opinion, that people are not able to understand prior. Do you have a comment on that?
I couldn't agree more. In fact, I grew up in a Christian environment. My father was a pastor of a non-denominational church. Again, I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and much of my early life, I was frustrated because I was subject to what I describe as Sunday school indoctrination, which it can be very, very well-meaning, but at the end of the day, it's actually pretty destructive to a to a mind that seeks truth, because basically you get inculcated with an idea, with a perception of the world, with a perception of Christianity, with a perception of the gospel. It's like a coloring book perception. It's like a children's book perspective on the world that is inaccurate and incorrect. There's probably people out there who grew up in churches and who went through the whole Sunday school age and can identify with what I'm talking about. But what happened to me was I knew that there was some really immense critical pieces missing in my worldview, in my Christian worldview. I knew that there were some biblical truths, some crucial biblical truth that I simply was not being fed. And I couldn't put my finger on it, but there was a divide. There was a gap, so to speak, between what I would read in the scriptures as a child and what I would see as living, breathing reality all around me. There was something palpable missing for me. There was a connection that needed to be made between the words of the text and the reality of the text. And I've always had a very meaningful relationship with the Lord ever since I was young. Much of that I attribute to my parents, who were very good parents, raised me in a very godly way, and they guided me. And it was no fault of theirs that I was having this internal struggle, this Sunday school indoctrination, as I refer to it, because many people just don't know any better. They don't understand that I believe, especially in our time and in our generation, there are many people coming up in churches and in being raised as believers who are also feeling that there's something missing. There's that palpable feeling that something is missing. There's a disconnect. I'm missing some pieces. I need to find them. And so it really all began to become exceedingly apparent to me when I left my home when I was 19 years old. I left Cleveland, literally got on a bus and had a one-way ticket to Peru. And that's a long story. I won't go into the backstory, but I went to Peru, literally leaving my life behind. I thought there was probably a good chance I would never see my family again, but I was hungry. I was desirous of reality, of truth. So, having come from that sort of a background, I now find myself thrust into this realm of what you were talking about, this sort of unbelievable reality that one encounters in the Bible, in the text of Scripture, but also in many oral traditions and in many other texts as well, that are easy to discover once you start to look and see what the true history of this planet is, and what the true narrative, what the true story is of our race in a biblical context. And that once you start to go down, it's a never-ending quest, deeper and deeper. And I'm sure that you've experienced the same.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are, finding similarities in the type of journey, and that a lot of people also have left the churches simply because they're not finding the deeper answers and are not getting guidance as far as their church authorities, the leaders, to things such as Genesis 6 and the giants, and how this connects to the ancient aliens, which is being pushed, and in my opinion, is part of the next step as far as the strong delusion and all of that is unfolding, and erupting. And I believe, and I'm not sure if you do, but I feel that we're the last generation, and that this is the reason why we see such revelations being poured out, and a lot of people really starting to dig deeper and discovering that indeed the Bible has these esoteric aspects to it, which aren't, like you said, are not covered in Sunday school. And this is the journey for a lot of people. It's the beginning of the journey to discover more. I'll get you to comment on that, and then we'll go into your journeys.
No, I agree, and I like how you refer to it as the esoteric truths or mysteries that are there in the Bible. People have a hard time with that. I absolutely agree with what you just said. But people have a hard time with the idea that there's anything esoteric or hidden in the Bible, when it is. I mean, that's what the unfolding of the gospel was, in fact, because the truth, the reality of who Jesus was hidden in the Old Testament. And when Jesus stood in front of the scribes and Pharisees, they couldn't recognize him.
Right.
They didn't know who he was. And he told them that they searched the scriptures, but basically all of the scriptures are pointing to him, are speaking of him. In other words, if they were truly looking, if they were truly able to see, if they had eyes to see that the esoteric hidden things in the Old Testament, they would have in the Torah and in the books of the Old Testament, they would have realized that Jesus, who was standing in front of them, was in fact the fulfillment of all those things.
Yes.
And they didn't see it.
Right, right. Yeah, I'm in full agreement with you. But speaking of the root of evil, I wanted to backtrack just a little bit and go to the garden and the garden parable, and speaking about the enmity between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent. Because it seems like the scripture is alluding to that there was something different about Cain. And I wanted to ask you, if Cain being different, do you think that that is one of the reasons why in the Kebra Nagas it mentions that the the sons of God mated specifically with the daughters of Cain, and that that could lead to that possibility?
Yes, I do. I think that there was something genetically different about Cain and his line that made them, as Tom Horn puts it, fit extensions for something. They were appropriate candidates for something. There was something going on in the line of Cain. And by the way, I also believe that the descendants of Cain were also involved in something. They were doing something.
Yes.
That basically they opened the gates. They did something that allowed for the advent of those watchers to descend.